Right, hello. So we're going to look at autism spectrum disorder today, and along with the research that was done, we would have also interviewed a mom whose 5-year-old son is on the spectrum, and he is actually homeschooled by his mom who has been trained in that particular field. Now, let's take a look at what autism spectrum disorder is. It is a developmental disability that can cause significant social, communication, and behavioral challenges. Now, there's often nothing about how a person with ASD looks that sets them apart from other people. But people with ASD may communicate, interact, behave, and learn in ways that are different from most to other people. The learning, thinking, problem-solving abilities of people with ASD can range from gifted to severely challenged. Now, some people with ASD experience different symptoms, so therefore some individuals need a lot of help in their daily lives, while others may need less. In fact, two kids or two children with the same diagnosis may look very different when it comes to their behaviors and abilities. Now, autism is not a single disorder, but a spectrum of closely related disorders with a shared core of symptoms. The three most common forms of autism in the pre-2013 classification system were autistic disorder or classic autism, Asperger's syndrome, pervasive developmental disorder, not otherwise specified. Now, these three disorders share many of the same symptoms, but they differ in severity and impact. Autistic disorder was the most severe, while Asperger's syndrome, sometimes called high-functioning autism, and PDD-NOS, or atypical autism, were the less severe variants. Now let's look at the impact. In 2018, the Center of Disease Control and Prevention determined that approximately 1 in 59 children is diagnosed with an autism spectrum disorder. It is also noted that boys are 4 times more likely to be diagnosed with autism than girls. So let's dive deeper. How is autism spectrum disorder diagnosed? Now, firstly, I want to say that diagnosing ASD can be difficult since there is no medical test like blood tests or any other medical test to diagnose this disorder. Now, doctors simply observe the child's behavior and development to make a diagnosis. ASD can sometimes be detected at 18 months or younger. By age 2, the diagnosis by an experienced professional can be considered very reliable. However, many children do not receive a final diagnosis until much older. It is highly recommended that a child under the age of 5 years old should not receive a final diagnosis due to the fact that they have not yet matured. This delay means that the child or children with ASD might not receive the help needed. Now, remember we said we interviewed a mom, and let's call her Mommy H. Mommy H recalls the experience of her son's diagnosis. She stated that her son was given something called an at-risk for ASD diagnosis. This simply meant that the doctors and therapists believed that he displayed symptoms of ASD and would have observed his behavior until he was mature enough to receive a final diagnosis. Now, diagnosing ASD takes 2 steps. Let's look at step 1, which is developmental screening. Developmental screening is a short test to tell if children are learning basic skills when they should or if they might have delays. During developmental screening, the doctor might ask the parent some questions or talk and play with the child during an exam to see how she learns, speaks, behaves, and moves. A delay in any of these areas could be a sign of a problem. Now, additional screening might be needed if a child is at high risk for ASD. For example, if his brother or sister or other family member has ASD, or if behaviors sometimes associated with ASD are present. Comprehensive diagnosis evaluation. This is a thorough review which may include looking at the child's behavior and development and interviewing the parents. It may also include a hearing and vision screening, genetic tests, neurological testing, and other medical testing. In some cases, the primary care doctor might choose to refer the child and family to a specialist for further assessment and diagnosis. And I would have listed some specialists who can assist in this, such as the developmental pediatricians, doctors who have special training in child development and children with special needs, child neurologists, doctors who work on the brain, spine, and nerves, child psychologists or psychiatrists, doctors who know about the human mind. That was step 2. Alright, so let's look at some interventions. Let's look at, 2 challenges parents of children with autism encounter on a regular basis. Now, the first issue or challenge that this parent, Mommy H, would have expressed was communication, expressing basic needs, sharing simple greetings, creating simple sentences. Now, Mommy H expressed that, like other moms, when her son would begin screaming and bawling, she automatically became extremely frustrated, especially as a new and first-time mom, because she would have provided everything he needed and did not know what was wrong with him. The difference is, he was a 4-year-old child who could not say or express what was wrong. Now, the second one was stepping away from routines. Now, we're going to refer to the child as Sunji. Sunji developed routines unbeknownst to his parents, and if those routines did not take place, he would often have a meltdown. For example, she explained if she would have made fries for dinner 2 days in a row, Sunji would have expected that on the third day, Mommy would make fries for dinner. Another example she expressed was that he attended Sunday school at church every week, and if in particular 1 week there was no Sunday school, he would have a meltdown. Therefore, she had to find out in advance if there would be no Sunday school, and if there wasn't any, she'd have to prepare him days in advance for the fact that there'll be no Sunday school. Mommy H also stated that before she even noticed, a routine was formed by Sunji. It had already become a routine for him long before. Alright, so let's now look at some interventions. We're going to look at behavioral management, social skills, and academic interventions. Now, 2 behavior interventions that can assist a student or a child with ASD is the discrete trial teaching, which is basically where you teach the skills in a controlled step-by-step way. The teacher uses positive feedback to encourage the child to use new skills. Now, positive reinforcements and incentives help with behavior management. For example, Mommy H stated that she uses the token board system. Now, remember, Mommy H has also been trained to be the homeschool teacher for her son. Now, this helps Sunji to focus and keep on task because he is working towards a particular goal at the end of the day. He will receive a reward when he completes this task. It is important to note, however, that rewards should be reduced gradually so that intrinsic motivation can be developed. Now let's look at positive behavioral and support. Now this aims to figure out why a child does a particular problem behavior. It works to change behavior more positive for the child. It works to correct that behavior, sorry. This encourages the child to behave correctly. Now, understanding and identifying what caused a certain type of behavior so that the student can be helped through that situation or behavior. For example, when Sanji would often cover his ears and scream at the top of his lungs. At first, this would have been considered to be misbehavior. However, after some observation, Mommy H, along with their therapist, was able to identify that the child has specific sensitivity and the mic or speakers or loud noises were just too loud for him. This caused a behavior that was deemed as naughty. Also, visual stimulation issues caused Sanji to scatter a glass jar of beads onto the floor. For Sanji, visual stimulation issues basically means that he's extremely intrigued by small, colorful objects. His teacher, his mom, then began to slowly introduce and place them in the classroom so that he could grow accustomed to them, and that when his teacher is not around or his parents are not around, he could be able to have self-discipline and tolerate his urges to scatter that jar. Now, some other behavioral management interventions are pivotal response training and also early intensive behavioral intervention. Now, let's look at 2 social skills interventions. Now, practice simple routines such as greeting so that they can cope with a regular interaction in society. For example, Sanji can perfectly have a surface level conversation with others. His parents would have spent ample time practicing such greetings such as hello, how are you today? And he responds by rote. Another example that was shared was practicing wearing a costume days in advance so that he'll be comfortable wearing that same costume at his cousin's birthday party. Another social intervention, understanding what their triggers are and working towards regulating them. For example, Sanji had issues going into big crowds because he believed that when a big crowd is gathered, they would be clapping. Now, what his mom did was help him to count down. So she would count down to 5 seconds, and hopefully by then the clapping would have ended, and she would have comforted him through those 5 seconds. And this would help him to cope while being in crowds where clapping is taking place. Now, it is also critical to note that social skills interventions are only successful if instructions and activities that provide necessary support for language abilities of the participants are the focal point. Now let's look at one academic intervention, sensory integration therapy. This aims to help children with sensory processing issues by exposing them to sensory stimulation in a structured, repetitive way. Now, this is important, especially because you have to learn the individual's learning style, right? For example, Sanji is a visual learner, and he was unable to understand the math concept greater than and less than. His mom observed that he couldn't simply understand this concept from the textbook, so she would have used some of the beads which he usually plays with or knocks over, and she would have made 2 piles. Now, one pile consisted of 5 beads while the other pile consisted of 2 beads. And he was then able to connect and understand the greater than, less than concept, because he was able to see that the pile with 5 beads was greater than the pile or consisted of more beads than the pile with 2 beads. Now, let's look at some simple takeaway tips. And this could really help you in your new journey if you focus on them. Firstly, do sufficient research. Ensure that you spend enough time just researching the topic of autism and just completely understand what ASD is.